I think if you go in now to the next part, the type of needles which are out there, there's different scenarios. There's a flat needle, which is maybe one of the most common used ones up to the 80s. There's a round grouping, which you see in the second one right here, which is also very widely used throughout the world. I think it's still used a lot for smaller tattoos and has been used exclusively up to the 50s and 60s. There's the world famous Magnum, which is actually would be if there is seven needles, let's say like they go like this, one after another one, and then this one is raised up. The middle one is going to be now here. Usually it's done with a razor blade, what gets pushed through, and then it gets staggering one here, one here, one here, one here, one here. So that's a Magnum. Why do they do that? Because it creates a lot of opening in here between the needles where the color can reside, and when you enter the skin it's actually reversing it and you have a lot of color movement. This was maybe one of the biggest advancements in the tattoo industry when it comes. What do I think about curved magnums, Thomas? Love him. I started using him about, I think, I would say 20 years now. I would never ever in my life, me personally, work with a straight magnum. I would not do it, and I can show you right now why. I don't know if people all know what it is. There's a magnum like this. This would be a straight magnum. And then there's a curved magnum where the outside needles are further in the back than the inside needles. So instead of being like this, straight down, the needle looks like this. And what happens is like when you stretch the skin, what sometimes happens, or most of the time, if you're not really good with it, the outside of the skin, when you stretch it and you have a straight needle, the skin curves. It's never straight, you know. This would be the skin. And if it's the outside of the needle, it's either way. When you go and push the needle in here, then you sit in the middle here. So you want to try to get that shade that you have a little lighter side on the sides, and that's why I love the curved magnets. I think everybody should try it. I think it's a mandatory, you know. Um, the second part, what you see, it's a double stack. So what it means here, it's actually not weaved like the Magnum, where one goes like this. This would be the way of a Magnum looking. Double stack, you see there's two layers of needles, which would be seven, and like in this case, this is a seven double stack, which would be three on top and four on the bottom. If you would have a Magnum, you would have seven right next to each other, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they would be weaved like this. So the 7 Magnum is wider than the double stack, but they also have more points. This was a preferred usage in the early 90s by people like Bernie Luther, Philip Blue, myself, Tintin. We use double stacks, buck pins, which you see in the next part. As you can tell already, this is a stainless steel needle up here with a short taper, and this is a buck pin. The biggest difference between those is that they're very thin and soft needles. They're very forgiving. They're soft, that they're not as stiff. So, but also what's really important is like if you have a stainless steel needle like this, two of them, let's say a Sharps 11, and I'm going to come to this a little bit later, you would actually have, with a buck pin, you would have 3 of them because they're thinner. And if they're thinner in the same spot, what basically happens is like you have more punctuation of the skin, more little holes where the color can enter, so you have a more solid color area. So it's very sought after needle. I think they're coming back out of it. They were created in Austria way back in the day. I don't know if it's done yet, but hopefully we all cross our fingers that those needles come back to the market. We're going to have a lot of fun with them because they're very good to work with, especially in black and gray shading. Let me come a little bit to the types of needles. There's so many needles available now outside by any supply company that people get confused. I think the biggest part, what you should really know, that there's long tapered needles, which are on the left side of this picture. They say SS needles, which means stainless steel needles. And they have a long taper. What it means is like the taper starts somewhere back here and then slowly becomes a fine point. Those needles are great when you group them together to make lining needles, because you can really get a fine point. So you can use 7 long tapered needles to make a very fine line. So those needles are usually not very well to be used for a single needle, because they're so fine and so thin that they're going to become really sharp, and you put them into the skin tends to bleed right afterwards, and also the color tends to bleed because it creates like a slicing effect sometimes. So you need to be a very, very well seasoned pro to really use that in single needle form. Those are great if you type them together, if you make them, if you buy them stainless steel, long tapered needles, tight fit. They're almost like the stainless steel needles. Um, the next part is like you see right next, short tapered stainless steel needles. It's like you see it here, it has a shorter taper, so the tip is significantly, if you see the length of this and going here, is significantly shorter. That means it creates a larger puncturation in the skin in a shorter distance of the needle where it has to go into the skin. So if this one would create the same thickness here, then here you see you need to put this needle way lower in the skin than this one. Why did we do this? It is when you go into coloring, you want to make sure that you don't go too deep. If you go too deep, your color is going to go to the fat tissue, and your pigment really doesn't have anywhere to anchor on. So that we don't have to go too deep into the skin, we were looking for shorter tapered needles. So that means you can bring the color in, but you don't have to go as deep, and your color is really laying right by the dermis where it should lay. So you should always, there is people which can work with long tapered needles in coloring. I prefer short tapered, so do a lot of people as well. A little bit more closer in the setup, you see it here. If you would have a long taper, this needle would come all the way back here and come back up here. So this is what makes the huge difference on it. It's like you enter it here, it's less depth, it's less trauma to the skin. The more easy the color goes in, the less damage the skin has, the more brighter the color heals. It's a must understand. When it goes in easy, it's gonna heal bright. If it goes in difficult, it's not gonna heal bright. It's just how it is. It's just like if you hit a gas pedal, if your car runs, it's gonna go fast. That's just how it is. There's really no other rules on it. I'm gonna try to, there's one question that came up, and I really didn't address this in the beginning. Many guys doing grade shading with rotaries. Does rotaries are hard for smooth shading? No, I don't think so. I think it doesn't matter what kind of machine you use, if it's a rotary or a spring machine. If you learn how to use it and you understand how it works, I think either of them make it easier or more difficult. I think if you train yourself well with a rotary machine, then you can be unbelievable with a rotary. If you work with coils, you're going to be unbelievable with coils. The key is that you really, really, really try to just like really work on your technique and advance it, and try to learn on it and accelerate on it. It's going to give you a lot more freedom in your artistic expression when you get the technique down. I think it's a huge key, you know. So what do you think you got from the East to do everything with colors with 7-round shader? But listen, it's not only in the East. They're gonna do it on the West, or they're gonna do it everywhere. You know, Patrick. It's like, I think if you master the 7-round, look. I mean, let's go back to the answer to this question. Jack Rudy uses 1 needle in shading, and I think there's still not a lot of people who can like come close to his shading. So it doesn't matter if you use 1 needle, 5 needles, 7 needles, or 100 needles, like Philip does with the 36 or 72 Magnum. If you master it, if you master your tool, you can unleash your potential to become a great artist, and I think that's the key to it. I think that's a really big part on the main situation, that you really have to master any kind of tool you use, you know, and that's what we really try to do here. It's like because the creativity connects all of us. So the more creative you guys can get, the more connected we are, because the more challenged we are in like to create better tattoos. And I think this is all what it's about. Um, it's it's I want to go to another part of the needles. There's a second section as well. There's stainless steel needles and carbon needles. Um, it's it's the very simple difference between those two is that a stainless steel needle, when you make them by yourself, which the most people of you maybe not doing anymore, they're very easy to handle. When you solder them, when you get them together, they don't rust as easy. They're not like when you touch them, if you have to touch it for some reason, then there's no residue on it. They're easy to clean. They're smooth. They're like, they're shiny. They're all great parts. The carbon surface is rough, it's dull, you can't touch it, it's gonna have a residue, it's gonna tarnish really quick, it's gonna have a different part. But what's the difference on that, which is very significant? A stainless steel needle itself is a very smooth surface. So if it's a smooth surface, the color has less surface to grab onto. So it's never gonna transfer as much ink back into the tube as a carbon would. So if you look at that, it's like if you really would like zoom into this, the carbon surface looks almost like this. So it's not like a smooth. This looks like an ice skating ring. This would almost be like sand a little bit, and this would be like an ice skating ring. So of course more color is going to grab onto it because the pigments really can stay onto this. I tend, when you train yourself perfectly, and you practice, either way are great. I think more unconventional are now carbon surfaces because they have way more maintenance. And way back in the older days, it was like easier to work with stainless steel needle because it was just like a way easier way to work. Carbon is definitely a try. If you can buy them sometimes from somewhere, there is people out there still, some supply companies which sell them. Just make sure that they're not tarnished when you want tarnished. I think if you buy them, make sure you look at them under an eye loupe. They're very soft needle. Their tendency is that they have a little dip in the front like this, and it's really bad. So make sure you double, triple, quadruple, five-triple check this needle. But it can maybe open a whole new avenue for you. It's like looking through a different like microscope. It's just two different outcomes. So let's check it out. Let me just see something if you guys have a question which are going after it. What do I think about stainless steel textured needles? I think it's a nice thought. It's a nice try. I don't know yet if it would be bringing. It's still a smooth surface, even if it's textured. It's still a slick surface. That's what stainless steel does. It's like it's just a smooth surface, and it has to be polished up to that way. So I think as soon as it gets polished, it's just different than a carbon needle. That's just my own personal opinion, so it doesn't mean that they're not great or not. This is just my experience on it.